So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Hackett from PCI College, and I am one of the faculty on staff. With me today, as part of our ongoing PCI College talks, is Linda Breathnach. Linda, you're very welcome. Thanks for taking part.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah, I'm working with PCI. I'm lecturing, and I'm also a counsellor psychotherapist. I've been working with couples, individuals, and groups for nearly 20 years, and I'm also a married mum of 4.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's a busy lifestyle anyway, no doubt about it.
It is, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I saw the interest or the topic of your talk, which is really interesting for today, is couple communication during challenging times. I assume couples is a chunk of the work that you do.
Yes, I've been working with couples for a long time. Yeah. And I'm also part of one.
Right. Yes, indeed. Lived experience.
Lived experience, exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, we're in strange and interesting times these days where families and especially couples are kind of thrown together, whether working from home or in maybe they're caring for people or caring for each other even. But inevitably, I'm guessing kind of conflict can arise. Tell me a little bit some of the challenges that couples would face now that they're kind of locked in together.
Yeah, so I think now is a time that any issues that might have been slightly bubbling beneath the surface originally, they're all going to come out in the wash at the moment. I think, we might have plodded along and just about got by, turning a blind eye to certain issues as time has gone on, and any of those issues are likely to come up now as we're all under one roof and trying to get by. So this is a really challenging time to face up and work through things that maybe we didn't really want to for a long time, and that's hard because it's not by choice, it's just coming our way. I suppose there's opportunity in that too.
So maybe being co-located and being in each other's company for so long, old stuff, not just the challenges of now, can bubble up. Say a little more about that if you would.
So, well, it could be anything, I suppose having worked with couples for a long time, the issues that couples come with can vary. They can be huge or they can be tiny, but it's not, I suppose, what the issue is doesn't really matter, and what my view is on the issue isn't even as important. It's how the couple communicate around that issue. So I suppose some examples, that could be just under the surface all along might be issues with in-laws, and whether they're too close or not close enough, or interfering or not interfering, not playing a part in helping out, disagreements around parenting, childcare, bringing our own upbringing into our relationships in terms of what we thought was normal and acceptable and assumed that everybody else did the same, and then all of a sudden we're in a couple and we don't, we realize that our partner hasn't had the same upbringing, it's not the same norm for them. So it could be in-law, extended family. Finance is another one where, I suppose especially now where jobs might be under threat. Maybe, again, there might have been financial issues that weren't being faced originally, and they're just all coming to a fore and being further magnified and probably exasperated by what's going on at the moment. So it could cover anything, I suppose, but I suppose the principle is the same in terms of the relationship. So I could be the third person in the room when I'm working with a couple, and it doesn't matter what my view is on finance or parenting or in-laws or outlaws. And it doesn't even matter that each person in the couple has different views. What matters is how they communicate and overcome those disagreements or those different views as they try and work together.
Okay, brilliant. So there can be lots of different sources of conflict, some old stuff, things that have been unresolved for a long time. And I suppose inevitably those can bubble over into arguments between couples. Is there any idea and steps on how a couple could argue well in that way?
Yeah, well, I have lately started quoting Coleman Noctor in that context, the child psychologist, who said no argument is ever resolved in an argument, and that's definitely been my experience as well. So I suppose, again, we're back to talking about communication and how things are communicated. And a lot of the focus with couples tends, especially if they've been together for a long time, tends to be on the other person and what the other person is doing wrong and how they need to change. And if only they could fix this part, then we wouldn't have any trouble. And a lot of the work I do working with couples is helping, and it sounds ironic when you're in a relationship for such a long time and you spend a lot of that time focusing on the other person. It does sound ironic that I'm helping couples to separate themselves from each other and put a line again between them as two individuals, and to start focusing on themselves first rather than the other person, and to take responsibility for themselves individually as part of that couple in the communication.
Right. So beginning with
third, yeah.
Sorry. So starting with themselves, kind of I type statements rather than pointing the finger outwards at their partner all the time.
Yeah, so that would be the first step that I would suggest with couples, is to, if you do have to address something or you want to get something out in the open, which is important to do as much as possible, but to do it when you're expressing yourself, to express it from an I feel perspective. And I often, with a bit of humour, say that doesn't mean you can say I feel that you did. It means I feel. So there's a big piece of work in that, and actually literally turning your back and kind of going, okay, what's going on for me right now? What is bothering me about this? Instead of, focusing all the time on what the other person is doing wrong, what they need to change, what their flaws are. It's a bit like what I do in parenting with my own kids. If they come in telling tales, and I say this to couples as well, I don't really want you to be telling me what the other person did wrong. What's going on for you first? And with the kids, it's what did you do wrong?
Absolutely.
What part did you play and what can you do differently? So the first step, is to speak from yourself, from your own perspective, from an I feel, and it dissipates, then takes away the blame and the criticism and prevents the other person from going into defense. It'll actually help your partner to hear you better if they try to hear you from an understanding perspective.
Okay. And what is kind of the content of what you're trying to communicate then? Is there a second step as to how to do that? So you've started with the owning it and taking responsibility, beginning with an I rather than a finger pointing you. Is there kind of a second step then? What would they do in terms of content?
So the first step is focusing on yourself, checking what you're feeling. And the second step is expressing it. So saying it in the I feel. So the third step then is checking for understanding. And that's really just clarifying, because, and I know myself, I'm guilty of this in my own relationship, that when you've been in a relationship for a long time, you tend to nearly mind read or think you can mind read, and you make assumptions. So you read between the lines, you look at body language, you see somebody get into a mood or withdraw, or you think they're in a mood or withdrawn, and there's always a risk that you're wrong, that you're misreading the signs, and that you're actually assuming something that maybe the other person isn't happening for them at all. So one assumption that we can be at risk of doing when we express our feelings, and when we figured them out, which is step one, when we've expressed them, which is step two, the third part is we really need to work hard to check that the person we're talking to has understood what we said. And the person that the second partner in the relationship needs to make an effort to check, have I heard you right? So what happened from your perspective has affected you this way, and this is how you feel. And that third step is the key one, because that takes huge effort. The temptation can be rushing, the person who's listening. So that the first partner has spent a long time figuring out how they're feeling, expressing how they're feeling, and the second person can be bursting to interrupt and defend and react and explain and all of that, or attack. And so I suppose it's really important that if we're sticking to the I feel piece, so for that third step, that the second partner is working hard to make sure they've heard correctly and that they're understanding it from the other person's perspective. So it does mean putting yourself on hold for a minute or two while you tune into what's going on with your partner, and for the first partner to make sure that they've that communication thing is two-way, and the first partner has to work hard, if the second partner hasn't quite heard it, to put different words on it, and again with ownership and explanation from it, I feel, without the blame.
Yeah, so the other partner almost has to have a sense of empathy listening
Yeah.
as if what the other person was saying is true, and seeing what that's like in order to provide a response, then a really good response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that doesn't come easy, but it is worth it, and it's probably one of the, you know, the biggest challenges in a relationship is having the patience to really try and hear from the other person's perspective.
It sounds
But
like
it is,
those are all skills that can be acquired, though, with practice and repetition and a curious kind of ear to what your partner is really trying to say, I guess.
yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a lovely. I suppose there again, what I was saying at the start, there is an opportunity. We all have a lot more time than we used to, so why not try it now? You know.
That's great advice. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And in terms of next steps, then, what would the next steps be after those three anyway?
Okay. So if you've got to the third step and you're really clear that your partner understands what you've just said and explained from your perspective, and they have a sense of understanding you, and you've a sense that they are understanding and hearing you, well, that's when you can move into the next step, which is actually letting the second person talk from their perspective. But again, before they move into clarifying and explaining and all of that, the niggly part before that is to check, well, how is it now for you that now that you understand me, how do you feel knowing that I feel that way? So it's still about the first person. It's that last piece kind of just, you know, how does that affect you? And I suppose you're noticing even from all of these steps, these steps can be applied to every single problem. Nothing that I'm talking about is around solution or telling people, you know, what to do around solving their financial or parenting problems. It's about the communication. And it's my experience that once a couple can get to a place of understanding each other and onto the same page in that regard, then they can figure out all the problems.
Yeah.
You know?
So if one of the members of the couple, for example, are themselves feeling a little bit vulnerable as to what their partner might be saying, any suggestions as to help them with their vulnerability and kind of not becoming defensive in that?
It's really hard. It's really hard. And it's really hard to identify in ourselves. I've been working in it for nearly 20 years, and I know myself that I find it still challenging. But I think it comes back to that thing of trust, and it's about trusting ourselves as well as trusting the other person. So with vulnerability, and we know Brené Brown is the guru and talking about shame and vulnerability and all that goes with that, there's, you know, we have to be kind to ourselves as well as to each other. So if we're feeling a bit vulnerable or a bit guilty or a bit threatened or a bit, you know, if shame starts kicking in, you know, just, I suppose, to be gentle with that, you know, I think the key part is just knowing that we're feeling it, because often in anger, we're in defense and anger and attack mode. Vulnerability is most often underlying it, but we can't tune into it if we're focusing on what everything the other person is doing wrong.
Wonderful.
So I think slowing down and trying to be kind to ourselves, or if we're the partner supporting somebody that we notice that vulnerability, even if we notice anger, if we react with empathy, it's very hard for the other person to keep attacking and keep being angry back. So vulnerability is a really key part of this.
And with that empathy, you can diffuse a dialogue from going from a dialogue into an argument, as you said earlier, just to be able to suspend our own need to be right or to score points, and just really try and actually have a connection with each other.
Exactly. So it is about pausing, you know, being tuned into our own needs and our own vulnerabilities, but pausing them as we try to understand our partner and work on the communication. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And is that all the steps then? Have we gotten through all of them?
Well, the fifth step is the start of the next round of steps going the other way around. So the fifth step is after the fourth step, where partner 2 has expressed what it feels like to finally understand partner 1 and how that affects them. Step 5 is then given the opportunity for the second partner to respond in general and to kind of to clarify, no, it wasn't a Wednesday, it was a Tuesday, which is probably what they wanted to do in the first place after pausing all that. But I hope, and in my experience with clients, by the time they get to step 5, they're at a new kind of playing field. They're at a different level of understanding. And so it'll be a little bit more tempered. It won't be defending. It'll be saying, all right, I know, but I definitely didn't mean it that way. Or, you know, I had no clue that was what was going on for you. And now that I understand that, I just need you to know that actually, whatever it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's really, really good advice. And I suppose it is definitely possible for couples to acquire these skills by practice, by trusting each other, by taking the time to really listen without having to try and be right, to protect themselves from the vulnerability of that, I guess. Any other kind of practical tips or advice at this point, I wonder?
So I was thinking about this before our chat, and I came up with a few just key points. And the first one would be to pick your battles. Now more than ever, tensions are high, emotions are high, and we just need to, I suppose, just be aware and make allowances for that. So if somebody is freaking out about the toaster, it's not about the toaster, and we just need to allow for that. And I know we've definitely been doing a lot of that in our family. It's eased off. This week isn't as bad maybe as the first week or two, but you know, we all took turns having little strops, and that's to be expected. It's, you know, it's a difficult time, and so it's important to pick our battles. There's no good reacting and starting freaking back at somebody else when they're kind of, when something might hit us all in waves at different times, but there's no point in exacerbating it further by us all joining in. Yeah, so pick your battles, and also take responsibility for our feelings. My feelings are my feelings, and your feelings are yours. I am not responsible for my partner's feelings, and they're not responsible for mine. And I think, I know for my experience anyway, with couples, if they can get that message, that it's not up to us to make somebody happy, and it's not up to us to make somebody angry or sad, or we can't do that. Letting go and kind of realizing another person's experience of this crisis, you know, isn't a reflection of us as a person. If we can keep that in mind, sounds very simple as I say it so quickly there. I know it's a big thing to grasp, but it's helpful to bear in mind when we're trying to support each other, I suppose, and ourselves.
And I suppose it really helps to normalize everyone's experience of some of the real challenges of not just sustaining relationships, but also under difficult circumstances like we face right now. So it's great just to have a little bit of wiggle room to recognize that maybe we don't always get it right, and though we're trying to do right by ourselves or our partner, there are better ways and better skills and perhaps enhancements that we can make in our dialogue together. Yeah. Any other kind of key messages in that then, I wonder?
Yeah, and just while you say that, one I'm thinking of is trust, to trust each other, to trust that we're, you know, the intention is good, that, you know, maybe, you know, I think we mightn't, I'm kind of covering 2 or 3 of the points I prepared earlier, but we mightn't have, you know, intent, you know, we mightn't have, if we're trying to help, we mightn't have got it right. You know, so somebody's helping somebody else with a particular job in the house or in the garden or whatever. They mightn't do it the way the first partner wants them to do it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. So if we're going to let each other help, we need to, I used to say it as a joke to my friends, if you're going to let your husband help, you know, you have to let them do it wrong. But that's not wrong. That's just not my way. And I suppose that goes vice versa as well, you know. There's, you know, everybody might be, you know, we're all living under the same roof differently to the way when we were fly by nights, kind of everybody doing their own thing. And I suppose there is a lot more sharing, and but there has to be a lot more allowances and trust that the intention is good, even if it's not being received the same way. We need to check and not assume that the intention was bad.
And it sounds like one of the other skills or attributes necessary is a bit of patience. That my way isn't necessarily the only right way, and to be patient when somebody perhaps doesn't have the skills or maybe even the experience as we do, the way we would do something ourselves. So to be patient in that.
Absolutely. It's no better opportunity to learn that skill of patience. And I suppose maybe it's something we've kind of forgotten in the past. You know, we've all been go. So now more than ever, we have to be patient, even just to wait until this situation passes. So patience, it's definitely a good time to learn that skill.
Yeah. And I suppose for some couples, maybe there's a bit of a pressure at a time like this to feel like they're almost Siamese twins co-joined at the hip, that they have to be this kind of couple all the time, which I'm sure can create a bit of friction. Any suggestions to help couples who are living maybe in a more confined space, an apartment or somewhere where they don't necessarily have all the space in the world?
Yeah, so I have recommended a lot in the last few weeks for people to take breaks, take breathers, have Zoom calls in a separate room with your friends and family, extended family outside of the couple, go for walks and have long telephone conversations with your close friends outside of the couple, and keep in touch with other people as well as each other. Take breaks. That's,
Great. We can
absolutely.
give
And I think
ourselves.
it's definitely something we could forget. You kind of might get a bit stuck with that, but it's so important for the other relationships as well as for your partner. Yeah.
To be able to give ourselves permission to step away from the relationship, to step away from the couple, to take some time
Yes.
on our own, even just to breathe or have a walk
Yeah.
within the 2 kilometer distance, of course,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
good citizens and good partners as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Because sometimes I think you might assume that you have to go for that walk together or something, and you don't. You
Great.
don't. Yeah.
That's very helpful. So we're pretty much at the end of our time today, and it feels like it's
Great.
flown. We could probably sit and talk for hours and hours and end, I guess, about this bit.
Yeah. We
Thank you
could.
very much. Those advice, those insights, and those skills are very practical, I think, at a time like this. So thank you very much for them. Is there anything you'd leave a couple with who may be experiencing some communication difficulty, or even a hopeful kind of statement or insight from your years of experience?
I suppose the last thing I would just like to maybe just leave people with really is about that concept of kindness. And I suppose a lot we think about it about being kind to other people, but I think if we can be kind to ourselves first, because often we're criticizing ourselves without even realizing it, and then we start criticizing those around us. So if we can be kind to ourselves and treat ourselves as well as we treat other people, that would be a good start. So to apply these new lessons that we'll be working on with ourselves in the relationship, to apply it to ourselves as well, and to be kind. This is a tough time, but it's temporary.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your time and for those great snippets, those great insights. It's wonderful to have somebody who's been through it and is a model citizen in couples over the next while. So thank you very much for that. We'll leave it there.
Thanks, Mike. No pressure there. Thank you. See
See
you.
you again.
Bye-bye.